Okay, we should get started now. Let me begin by just correcting an impression I may have given about this new book on the archetype of initiation. This came out, Sacred Space, Ritual Process, and Personal Transformation. This is a number of my lectures and essays over the years in which I look at the ritual dimensions of healing, both in spirituality and in analysis, and they tell me it will be in the bookstore, so you can order it through them. The other book that this is really reflections on my early research on this topic, and the book I mentioned, which is The Magician and the Analyst, which is a shorter monograph, but it contains all the technical, very tightly argued technical discussion of these things, particularly the role of the magician archetype in spiritual ritual and in transformation. It really goes with this book. It should be out in about probably 3 to 6 months. The Facing the Dragon book, which will be Facing the Dragon of Personal and Spiritual Grandiosity, is really an examination in a number of lectures on this great furnace, this great nuclear fusion furnace in our psyche, what you can call the archetypal self, or you can call it, like I have sometimes called it, the God self, or the great self within. It's my attempt to really connect a lot of recent theories about grandiosity in psychoanalytic theory, and to show how this dragon reality is real. In other words, none of you, in terms of our discussion today, none of you are without a generator in there. That's not really the problem of having one. There's a great dragon in there in the psyche, and the question is how to relate to that energy without having it kill you or other people, or without being so afraid of it that you just shut your connection with it down. And I addressed that in those Edinger workshops that are available now through tape, and these books are elaborations of that. Let's turn now to this question of the role of spirituality in transformation. And in this context, we're trying to keep this in a what I'd like to say a pan-tribal or post-tribal context. And so I'm emphasizing Tillich, the philosopher, today. And Jung is the psychologist of the human, the most adequate psychologist of the human. And so we're not talking about a particular tribe's appropriation of these things. What is clear from my research on this stuff over longer than I'd like to admit is that humans create spirituality to deal with the problems we're talking about today. That is, there's no such thing as a non-practical spirituality. To the extent that it is an authentic spirituality and not just a facade or persona religion, what I call persona religion in this book. Spiritual practice, authentic spiritual practice, is an attempt to connect with those energies that serve life, and to do so in such a way that they actually do serve life and don't turn demonic. And again, Tillich was fond of pointing out, and Jung in many ways pointed out, that these energies present themselves in lots of places, and they're not always the socially sanctioned places. And so you get a kind of what the great anthropologist Victor Turner, that I've done a lot of work with, what he calls the establishment structures point, the what we would call the establishment's point of view on these things, and then you have what's really going on. You got the manifest and you got the latent going on. So in other words, when you're looking at anybody's spiritual ideas of spirituality, you can look at what they think they're doing, and then you look at what they're actually doing. And so as I said to you, one of the things that was made Tillich so controversial, he pointed out that religious forms can both connect you to the energy and they can get in the way of the energy. So Tillich pointed out that any religious symbol can both, for some people, connect them with the energy, with the power of being, the transformative power of being, or they can block the person's view of that energy. And so if you want to get some understanding of the ambivalence of religion or religious symbolism of all kinds, you study Tillich. He's probably got the most sophisticated analysis of all that that exists, in the sense of making it very clear that you can never tell in advance whether a symbol is being transformative or not. The proof is in the pudding. He uses, it's in the 3rd volume of his systematic theology, he talks about, you know them by their fruits. You know, it's like, you can tell whether a symbol is creative in a person's life, but whether it's creative in a person's life or not. Is it serving life? Is it serving love, hope, peace, joy, courage, justice? And if the symbol is being used to create hate, which many religious symbols are used for by different people, if it's creating anxiety unnecessarily, if it's creating despair about life and human existence, if it's creating a justification for injustice, for example, Christianity being used to support racism, which has been a historical reality, or that sort of thing. For in India, for example, spiritual symbolisms being used to support the caste system. See? But Tillich would simply say, he wouldn't say that you automatically know by choosing a tribe that that tribe is using symbolism creatively. He says it's not that simple. What you do is you look at a particular context, a particular person, organization, culture, whatever, religious institution, and you say, how is this person or organization's appropriation of symbolism serving the transformative power of being toward life? Not, or, you say, and how is its use of symbolism, or his or her use of symbolism, serving the power of death? Non-being. Because Tillich would say that in every location, there's always this two-sided. Does that sound like Jung? Everything has a shadow side. There's no such thing as the right symbolism. It's right if it's serving creatively as a portal to the transformative powers of what Tillich calls the new being. Now, those of you who come out of the Christian tribes of various kinds, I mean, it would be interesting for you to pursue some of Tillich's reflections on that, because he's very hard on Christianity. He thinks that even the symbol Christ can be used in demonic ways. Every Christian symbol can be used in demonic ways. But you know, he's not picking on Christianity. He thinks that in every tribe, all of their symbols can be used in demonic ways. So there's a sense there that It's interesting. There's another place where he connects with Adler, the great Alfred Adler, because Adler always said, it's not what you believe, it's how you use it. And the way that Adler, I once wrote a paper on Adler's psychology of religion, and I pointed out in there that for Adler, you would examine the way a person uses the spirituality in their life and see whether it's encouraging their life and their treatment of others in a positive way or not. And that's the way you assess it, not the particular symbolic form. Okay, so in other words, Tillich, this is why Tillich, when he was alive and going around the country lecturing, he would fill up the houses everywhere he went. Big, he had a response from ordinary people just very similar to a rock star. He was really a celebrity. They could feel this energy in him. And he had very broken English. I mean, his English was not good. But people would come, they knew he knew something. He was kind of a portal for people. And this was a time when aggressive secularism was in some ways even more unchastised than it is now. There's a lot more interest in spirituality and spiritual life today than it was in the 50s in the United States. And that is in intellectual circles and in the cultural elites of America. And Tillich pointed out that the divine manifests wherever it wants to. It's very much like Eliade. You've heard me lecture, many of you have heard me lecture on Eliade. Right before Tillich's death, he and Eliade started working together down at the University of Chicago. And Eliade said right before his death that, Tillich said right before his death that if he had known Eliade earlier, his philosophical, his theological system would look very different, because he would have done a lot more work with other religions. He just got engaged with Buddhism late in his career. But that's sort of an accident of history. If you take the philosophy that Tillich, that I've laid out for you today, Tillich spent a lot of his time analyzing Christianity, but his philosophy can be used to analyze Buddhism, Hinduism, shamanism, you name it, because it is this whole model that I've talked to you about. It's uncanny how close it is to Eliade's reading of the way the sacred manifests and what happens when it manifests. And I've put here two words which we're borrowing from Eliade. I talk about that in the Archetypes Initiation book. Hierophany, the manifestation of the sacred, and then something that people didn't emphasize as much when they were talking about Eliade, that any time the sacred is really manifest, it is a kratophany, K-R-A-T-O-P-H-A-N-Y. That is a manifestation of the power. So that is, if the sacred is manifest, it will manifest as a powerful expression of energy. Not power in terms of political power, although Tillich has a whole theory of all forms of power. But if it is a effective spirituality, it will have energy. Does this mean that all forms that have energy are necessarily helpful? No, not necessarily. You can think particularly, you may have studied, as I have, a lot of the different, all the permutations of religious practice. And, for example, there are people that get really fascinated with evil. And it becomes very attractive. You see some of this, and you see this characterized sometime in the movies, and there's a lot of reality to it. People that get really fascinated by evil. One young man said, asking him why he was into Satan worship, he said, well, I want to be on the winning side. And you see, you get that? Now see, that's about, so you're looking at who's got the power, who has the energy. Well, they note young people are not stupid. They may be uninformed, but they're not stupid. And they look around and they say, in our world today, who's got the most energy and who's got the most obvious power? And young people look and they see in a lot of communities, who's got the power? Drug dealers. Who's got the economic power? And so there can be manifestations of mana in circles and through powerful priesthoods. I'm putting quotes around that, folks, on the tape. That do not really have the well-being of people as their first priority. One example of this is Madison Avenue in marketing. There's a lot of money and research going into a kind of advertising priesthood. And if you study how elegant commercials are in our culture, you understand that these people know about libido and energy flow, and they have a sense about how to appeal to people's primordial needs and to try to use symbolism to exploit that. And so those are forms of spiritualities, and Tillich today would and did analyze those things. Technology today manifests a lot of energy, a lot of power. And Tillich pointed out that it's very tempting today to turn to that uncritically and to avoid the kind of in-depth understanding of the spiritual life that we've been talking about today. But at the very least, if it's an actual spiritual practice worthy of the name, there is a connection with energy. But then the question is discernment. How do you tell whether this thing is demonic, very destructive or not? It's interesting. In Tillich's thought, we'll start with one thing here. He saw evaluation of people's spiritual situation on a continuum. We've already addressed this a little bit this morning, between two poles. That is the pole of profanization, that is becoming more profane experientially, and he didn't mean that like dirty words, he meant lacking in energy. Profanization is brownout. And demonic, the way he used it, as a part of his assessment of spiritual practice, demonic, in a sense, both of these are demonic in the way you and I might use the word in a larger sense. They are not, they're problematic. Both expressions are problematic. So you may be having problems in your life, in your spirituality, because you're having brownout. That's profanization. Or your church may be experiencing profanization. There may be no energy in your congregation. Your pastor or priest or rabbi or imam may not have any ritual genius. And so the rituals and the prayers and everything may seem like dry bones when they do it. That would be profanization. In Tillich's sense, the demonic is when the things are glowing white hot and the person is really plugged into the juice and they're really experiencing the contact with the 220,000 volts of spiritual energy. This, he would talk about, the danger of this is what he would call demonization. And demonization occurs when the energy is so strong that it overwhelms the person's capacity to regulate it. and it starts breaking the structures of their personality and their life. You can think psychotic break. Why is it that intense religious experience often is associated with psychotic breaks? That's the reason. It's a demonization. Yes?
So, just in what you just said about, I guess, with a shaman or somebody who goes into these psychotic breaks, at that point, and then the point you about just previous to that about the demonic level of energy, brings me to something puzzling in Joseph Campbell, some recorded lectures he did, where it was hard to tell whether he was saying like, okay, this tribe does this where they're going to actually destroy some people. And at first it seemed like he's saying, well, this is a problem because these people get destroyed. Then he seems to be saying, well, no, this is essential to tap into these levels of energies, and you wouldn't want to give it up.
Yeah.
And similarly, it was hard to tell, well, is it the shaman? Is there a problem of a person becoming psychotic, or it's not a problem because that leads them into some realm that would get.
Yeah, see, this is very complicated here. The question he's raising is very complicated. One, it's like if somebody's undergoing a shamanic initiation, do they become psychotic, or is that different from psychosis? Or if they are psychotic, would it be all right? Or in a tribe, they need to have their war dance. I don't know whether you've been watching that. Did you see the movie about the guy that went to visit the cannibals? What's the name of that? Somebody? Yeah, something about keep the river on your right. If you get a chance to see that, it's this incredible movie, and it's related to these things. This guy, this anthropologist, goes upriver to visit some headhunters, and he kind of goes native because there's so much juice in the tribe. And he finds himself on a raid of a neighboring village and participating in cannibalism. And so this would be an example of plugging into this primordial energy in a tribal form, and then being overwhelmed by it before you know what's going on. Very fascinating man. You have to look at that movie. But in any case, that's very complicated. The truth about the experience of shamans, healers, indigenous healers in any tribe is that, there are people that romanticize it from both ends. Some people want to make them expressions of psychopathology and schizophrenia. Usually that is not the case. The ones that fail their initiation and die, they're usually, they're the ones that could not make it through the heat. This thing about the mystical heat is a big thing in all spiritual traditions. And it's only if you're kind of on the outside of the spiritual tradition that you don't know much about spiritual heat. But if you get in the depths of the spiritual tradition, whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, shamanism, African religion, there's always this reality of the spiritual heat, which is this form of energy that we're talking about. While a shaman that makes it to be an authentic shaman, and there are many of them, goes through terrible ordeals, and many of them, and a lot of the initiations died during the process, and so they didn't become shamans. But just because they didn't become psychotic or were not killed during the process, to be a shaman, you have to fly so close to transpersonal energies in the course of your vocation that it's never safe. It's never, ever safe to be a shaman. You get to know a shaman intimately, and I've had the privilege of knowing some very close friends. And they will tell you up front, it's very dangerous being a shaman. And they have to be very careful, and they have to work very hard in their practice to have containment and channeling of their energy, and what some of the occultists that I studied would call psychic self-defense. They have to do a lot of self-defense, spiritual self-defense, because if you're a shaman in a tribal culture, you got a lot of people that hate you. because of your power, and who are very, and because certain shamans do get demonic and go very bad. There are people with shamanic initiations who get inflated and lose their capacity to be ethical. It's very tempting. See, that's the bad part about getting plugged into the energy, because when you get plugged into the energy, the tendency toward becoming what Jung called inflated is very, very close by. And so that's the more complicated thing. See, so in spirituality, whether it's shamanic or Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever, you got to plug into the energy, but you've also got to regulate. You've really got to work on the regulation. And because the danger, if you're really plugged in, is always that you're going to get over here. If you're plugged in, your problem will not be profanization. If you're a clergy person, or in some ways a therapist too, that is, and it starts becoming ordinary for you to do therapy, if it starts becoming ordinary for you to be a minister, then you're in danger of profanization, because you'll start going through the motions and your soul is not in it. Follow that? But if you're really plugged into the energy, that will not be your problem. That will be your problem. And so, and the grandiosity, that's what I've been spending so much time working on. It is so seductive. And it sneaks up on you from behind. So when you're the most in danger of being inflated and being out of control, you don't know it's happening. See, that's what we like to think. We like to think that people that are getting grandiose know they're grandiose. But it's almost never so. It's almost never so. So those are the two key issues now. So you think about it, when I have you turn to your neighbor now and do some discussion for a few minutes. Is your problem profanization? Have you had to struggle to get connected to the energy? If you are connected and you're aware of being connected to life energy, is it coming through a religious form? Or is it coming through art? Or is it coming through a person? Or is it coming through a celebrity? Where is the energy manifesting in your life? If it's not apparent to you, then you've kind of got it shut down. Doesn't mean you don't have it in you, or you're not connected to it internally. You got to look at Ettinger's book. You're just in that alienated place right now. You got to ask yourself where you need to drill, to get to it. Or do you have more energy and you know what to do with? And if that's the case, how do you experience it in your own experience? And so I've given you a lot of things that you can address in these few moments we're going to take now. Are you aware of which kind of anxiety you experience the most? You share that. Are you aware of which courage you have and which courage you need more of? You can share that. Are you connecting with power of being? If so, is it in a religious form, or is it in the arts? Or is it in your vocation? Or is it in your relationships? Because Tillich has a sacramental view of reality. The point is, wherever it really manifests, that's where it manifests. It may not have a religious name on it. And so let's find someone to dialogue with for a few minutes, and then I'll call you back together in just a very few minutes. Let's come back together now for a minute. I'll stick around and we can chat a little bit after we let people go, but I'm going to open it up just a minute. But I'm not going to have time to go into into all the ins and outs of containers. A lot about that is in this Archetype Initiation book. Let me just give you a shorthand. It takes ritual process relating to prayer, a highly developed participation in mythic symbols and rituals of a variety of kinds, both to connect with these energies. You need symbols for the reason they are a means of connecting to this energy. If you use something like an ideology, like some particular political ideology or some psychological theory to connect with these energies, you're using that theory in a kind of a symbolic way. It's you got to realize that everything becomes symbolic to some people, and they use it sacramentally. So Tillich pointed out that just because somebody is using the Republican Party, as a religious form, doesn't mean it's not religious. That is religious. It becomes religious at the existential level. It may be demonic, or it may be, to some of us, profane. But the point of it is that anything can become a symbol existentially for people. And that's another place you study Eliade's patterns in comparative religion to get a sense for that. Anything can become the occasion for the manifestation of the sacred and its power. Doesn't have to be a religious symbol. It becomes a religious symbol when it is a manifestation, when it's a vehicle, when it's sacramental. If it becomes sacramental to a person, that is mediating energy, it has become sacramental. It has become religious by virtue of the fact that it mediated the energy. So, but to get really conscious, which is the theme for our day, to really get conscious about this, you gotta think about, well, what am I using symbolically to connect with energy? Or what could I be using symbolically to connect with energy if I'm low on energy, if I've got brownout? And all the stuff about ritual process and the practice of spirituality is really related to these things. And there are a lot of resources for this now. A lot of people are doing creative ritualization. Women are doing it in women's groups. Men are doing it in men's groups. Believe it or not, I've even got some folks that are going to be rabbis, priests, and clergy who are learning how to use symbols. Fancy that. And increasingly, even though they're not Jungians, you'd think they were all Jungians now. Jungians forever have been trying to talk about the spiritual dimension of psychology and getting ridiculed for it, but now everybody wants to get in on the act, which is fine. We welcome that. Every little professional school of psychology's got a course in spirituality and psychotherapy, right? That's a good development. We just hope that they'll realize how complicated this is and that other people have been studying this stuff earlier and they might want to learn from it. So anyway, look at all the work that's being done now in prayer. That is a form of this. If you really want to plug into the energy, learn how to pray. It doesn't just come from Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, tribal peoples. They pray all the time. They knew something. That is, it helps to connect with the energy if you express the fact that you need it. So, in Christian traditions, they talk about this as the means of grace. Attending worship, spiritual studies, prayer, participation in liturgy, and so on. Each tribe has got resources on this. One of the nice things that's happening now is that the spiritual tribes are finding new ways to cooperate. Like there's this wonderful dialogue going on now between Christians and Buddhists all over the world. And as I said to you earlier, in terms of this Tillich thing, there's a lot of capacity to interpret Buddhism through Tillich. Very little of that's been done, but it's possible, and so on. So in other words, you got to look at some of the resources. You can look at some of these new books of mine that point to these things. But there's a rich thicket of resources for spiritual practice out there. Question is, are you consciously trying to find what's appropriate for you, and then have enough energy to have the courage to do the study and to actually put some of it in action, so that you can start having this problem that I would like you all to have, figuring out how to regulate all that energy you got. So if you don't already have that problem, I look forward to the day when you have it. And I'll celebrate that you've got this problem of having too much energy, and then we'll try to figure out ways to help you channel it. Now, let me open the floor up. We're just about out of time, but if let's take at least 5 minutes, and then I'll let everybody go, and then I'll stick around a few minutes to talk. Yes, back here. Things that came to you in your reflections.
I had a question about your chart.
Okay. But I want to hear from you some of your reflections about what we've talked about.
Look at that. Are those red lines that are on there, is that related to that the same way as it was earlier today?
No. That, Tillich would want you to understand that, that ground of being is always there, and it's always oozing the power of being. And it has, that at its core is an intentionality about being transformative power for rejuvenation. And so it's good that it stayed there, because that's very Tillichian. It's also very Jungian, because if you look at all this Jungian appropriation of symbolism, a Jungian will look at every religion and they'll find the fountain. They'll find the center. And it represents the archetypal self, and its energy is trying to come up to serve the ego. So look at Edinger on that. But no, it doesn't erase. I think they got one of those. I think they got one of those permanent markers. Okay, what came to your mind as you started thinking about this stuff, about your own spiritual life or your own experiences? Anything that you can share without going into toxic shame? Anybody? Yes.
The shame thing doesn't happen, but I'm recently been looking at my own life, and the energy thing that you talk about is very interesting, because I tend to take on, I guess, more than I should on some levels, but there's always been a burning thing about being a painter or an artist and having something to say, which I do, but not enough. I actually came here today because I was looking for just a jump start for my brain.
Yeah.
I haven't spent time with it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's very, probably a lot of us in here, if we would be honest, we've experienced that too. And what you got to realize, there's always this profanization thing. It doesn't rest. You got to understand that staying in touch with the flame, you got to be awake to do that. Most people. Now, some of you, it's just all around you, and you couldn't lose it if you tried. But most of us don't have that. Most of us, we connect with it, and then it starts to sediment. And literary critics say the sedimentation, it starts to get ordinary. We start losing that special energy. And so this is a very, very common thing. And this is and listen, the bad news is, so you're a young guy. As you get older, it gets worse. And so I say to people, look, one thing that's important about it, you need to know about the aging process. You need to work on this spirituality thing now and really build on a foundation, so that when the forces of death start climbing and start breathing down your neck, so that the despair, the temptation of the seduction of despair, that you don't just kind of embrace that, And the key, and I work with folks, folks that have many years, and I love it because it is not necessary to lose the fire as you get older. But you can't keep in touch with the fire if you're not awake. You have to, propane torches, many of you are not initiated into propane torches, but you have to adjust that flame. It'll burn very yellow if it's not adjusted right. Think of James Hillman's book, A Blue Flame, You adjust your spirituality. It's got to be tuned, folks. You've got to really tune your spiritual life. And to do that, you've got to attend to it every day. You've got to attend to it, hopefully the first thing in the morning and the last thing at night. And as much as possible during the day, like the indigenous peoples of the earth all did. They didn't pray once or twice a day. They practiced the presence of the spirit world all the time. And in order to, as you start aging, which we all are, you've got to really build your foundation and in terms of how do you stay close to the flame. Because you can do it. It can be done. I know people that do it. I know people of advanced years who I have to worry about them being too close to the flame. And that's exciting to me. That's very exciting to me. And so, but now's the time to start. There's no better time to start tuning that flame in you than now. And because if you do tune your spiritual fires, if you work with trying to regulate, learning how to access and regulate, and fight dirty, what works is what works, then you will have the energy you need to have the courage you need to face the truths you need to face, the dragons you need to face, and to imagine a vision for the next stretch of your pilgrimage, or your journey. And you will have the courage to take action and take a stand in the transformation, the continuing transformation of your best self, because it is, somebody said earlier, this just goes on and on. It does. Initiation is not something that stops. Initiatory process is another word for individuation. And the good news is that fire is available to you. It is there. And the reason we talk about spirituality is not just because it's a fad today. It's a fad. But the truth is, our forebears all got it. They all knew. And you see it in Victor Turner's work, Eliade's work, all kinds of people's work, Tillich's work. Spirituality has always been about locating the power with a capital P. The power without which human beings cannot have the energy they need to serve life in all its forms. So let me just close with that. I want to thank all of you for coming today. It warms my heart to have people interested in this topic. And let me encourage you to don't let yourself be daunted by the difficulty of studying Tillich, his books, because there really is a pony in there if you'll just keep digging. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Discover your true masculine power through the king, warrior, magician, and lover archetypes, energies that have defined strong men for millennia. In just 5 minutes, this free test reveals which of your masculine energies are in balance and which need work. The result? Clear direction for your personal development and masculine empowerment. Thousands of men have gained insights to reshape their lives. Why not you? Take the Masculine Energy Indicator test now at masculinetest.com.